Obviously we've talked a lot about our favorite exercises that your listeners probably do and have their clients do and
Mm.
things like that. But I really like, again, what you talked about with the hunter gatherer mindset of your
Mm.
approach to training, because
Mm.
ultimately when we think about exercises, what they really are is distillations of general movement patterns that have been kind of whittled down into a very precise type of movement,
Mm.
either with a given,
Yeah.
weight, a given
Yeah.
given technique. But you need to be good at the movement pattern in general. And in order to do that, again, taking an eagle's eye view, you have to be good at movement in general. And so,
Mm.
generally, my approach to helping people get stronger is kettlebells and body weight, obviously, but also fundamental human movements that they may not have been doing much of. And so, for instance, I'm a really big fan of Original Strength, which is a movement education organization that I've been affiliated with really since the beginning. Um, and they focus in very closely on what they call the resets, which are these are movements that help you to reset your body to move the way that it was made to move. And
Mm.
so for everybody that I start with, you asked a great question earlier about how you start with people who are beginners versus advanced, and how you work with them.
Mm.
We talked about consistency, we talked
Mhm.
about expectations and things like this. But the other thing is going back to like what Ido Portal likes to say, that,
Mhm.
Mike
Mhm.
Tyson may be the greatest boxer in the world or in history, but at the end of the day, he still has to squat down to pick up his kid. There are
Mhm.
still fundamental, foundational movements that upon which you're going to build your ability to do all these cool exercises. We
Mhm.
can see that when it comes to, like you got to be able to squat and swing and press and stuff like that before you can snatch. But the same holds true for the movements of what's called the human developmental sequence. So you ever see a little baby, starting to move around, they're kind of flailing their arms,
Mhm.
moving their head around, they start to roll, they
Mhm.
rock, and then they start to crawl.
Mhm.
This is a map of movement that helps lay the foundation for all the other later cool movements that we like to do. So if we go back and we make it a point to do these movements, what my experience has been with my students is that they get far greater results very, very quickly. And a lot of times we talk about mobility and
Mhm.
flexibility. This
Mhm.
is a very simple way to get them retuned to the movements that they were designed to do, that help them
Mm.
to get
I
this
love this.
mobility
Mhm.
and helps to
Mm.
free their body to do what it's supposed to do. Because a lot of times, our immobility comes from our nervous system trying to protect us because it doesn't feel like it can move. Obviously there are things like you talked about the
Yeah.
Celtic hip. That's different. But, there are a lot of people who have tight hips or tight ankles because their nervous system is craving stability and fears that too much
Wow.
movement is something that it cannot handle. And so if you
Fascinating. Yeah.
remind your body of what it's supposed to do, you're not trying to rewire it, you're trying to remind it what to do, a lot of things fall into place. And so what I'll do with people, uh, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, is I always like to start them off with the Original Strength resets and tie that into the kettlebell and bodyweight program that I have for them. So for a great example of this is crawling, for instance. You learn
Mhm.
how to crawl, learn how to march. Learn how to do loaded carries. These things they're
Mm.
very simple to do because your body's made to do them
Mhm.
instinctively.
Mhm.
It's easy to get back to it. But what a lot of people find is that suddenly, like, oh wow, I wake up, I'm not completely stiff and sore, like I normally am. My neck moves better. I'm standing a little taller. My posture has improved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's all of these movements that kind of feed into the later kettlebell and calisthenic stuff that you and I both love so much. And that's what I like to do. In fact, I have a free ebook. If anybody wants it, they can just go download it. Go to 9minutechallenge.com. But it's a
And I'll link it in
compilation.
the description. Yep. I'll link
Yeah,
it in
yeah,
the
yeah. We'll put the
description.
link in
Yep.
the
Most
description.
stuff. Yep.
Um, and it is a compilation of the major gait pattern movements. So gait pattern is
Mm.
your walking pattern,
Mhm. Mhm.
and done in a variety of different angles and a variety of different variations. So again, like crawling, marching, carries, and a couple of others. And ultimately, what ends up happening, and the really great thing about it is that these are all moves that are very non-exhausting. Your nervous system craves this kind of movement.
Oh
You
wow.
talked about a gentleman a little bit earlier in the podcast who talked about how we're made to walk all day long.
Mhm.
That's the ultimate reset, is that, like, you get to the point where you can walk, and if you do it a lot, it keeps a lot of things working the way that they're supposed to.
Mhm.
But if you haven't done it in a while, it's you want to rev the engine back up again. You're made to do all these cool kettlebell and bodyweight exercises, or you're able to do them, but you're
Mhm.
made to move in the real world. And the way that we navigate the real world is with the gait pattern. And so learning how to rejuvenate and restore it goes a long way toward helping you to get a lot stronger. So that's what I do, because it covers a lot of bases. Now, this is not the end all be all, but this is, again, it's the base. And upon this base, you can start building the different layers of skill and the different qualities and characteristics that that your heart desires. So
I love this, man.
that's where I start people.
It's powerful. These resets. I love how you describe that, because I say this as well. I say that the ability to do what I do now with the kettlebell or whatever lies in the person that lies in the client. I'm like, listen, you have this inside of you, because the human body, anatomically speaking, is made to move. So, and I love how you coined it. You don't rewire the system. You just how you call it? You refresh it, right? You remind it, right? You remind it, because you are able to do it. You are made, and wow. And the funny thing is, I kind of move into the same idea or the same patterns of coaching, because we have some clients who are really like the guy I've mentioned with the hinge. It took ages to learn the hinge, and when we did weighted stuff training, it was farmer's carries and suitcase walks. And we have a prowler sled, which I think it's one of the such a great low tech exercise. Pushing and pulling a prowler, a weighted prowler. This goes such a long distance. If of course, if you overdo it, you're going to burn yourself out. But for people who never touched weights, just moving, pushing, pulling, walking. Wow. And you are now really confirming this idea that it's not about rewiring the system. It's about giving it back the initial inputs that even helped you to stand up. I mean, the babies start walking by themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, wow, man, fascinating. Resets. Man, I got to check this out, because I saw this on your website that you mentioned something about original strength, right? I think you had somebody on your podcast, right? Tim.
Yeah, Tim
right?
Anderson. Tim
Anderson.
is great. Danny Almeida, I've also had her on. I've had, I've had one of the master instructors on, a guy named Mike Musselman. There are a lot of really smart people involved that I look up to very much, because they've pushed the system forward very far. And again, the really cool thing about it is it's not something they've invented. It's something that they've basically organized, because these are all movements we're made to do. So these aren't things that are like, this cutting edge stuff. This is as primitive as it gets. And if you want to go hunter-gatherer style, you want to be like really old school strong, and the ability to be harder to kill, as a friend of mine, Levi Marquardt, likes to say. You got to be able to move the way that we were made to move, and then you'll be able to do the things that you're capable of learning how to do.
Wow. The sad thing is that I am learning these phrases. For example, the human body is made to move, or reminding your body that you are able to do carry and push and walk, or what we essentially do is we are imitating what our ancestors did on an everyday basis: push, pull, walk, climb, carry. Well, there was nothing else that you had to do it, right?
Yeah.
And in the fitness and bodybuilding world, you never come across this idea. It's always you are inferior. That's why you got to do a lot of biceps curls to impress everybody. And then you are walking around like this, a lot of muscle, but very immobile.
Yeah.
And once I've really turned away from this idea and went into kettlebells and, talking to all these people, this is when this really opened up.
Yeah, suddenly you're able to navigate the real world the way that you were supposed to. And you don't just look good, but you also perform well.
Yes. Wow. And I think we can end it on this note. Alex, it was really, I really appreciate it. It was 1 hour and 45 minutes. Fascinating talk.
Absolutely.
And yes, people can find, where can people find you?
Well, again, they can go to 9minutechallenge.com. That's and it's 9 and then the word minute and then challenge. So the number 9.
Yeah.
You can also go to my website. It's alexsalkin.com. Now I have to let you know, my parents decided that they wanted to give me a funny spelling first name. So it's ALEKS.
Yeah.
K as in Catherine, S as in Samantha.
Not
and then
the
last
X,
name is,
right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell people it's Alec, but plural.